today. We're very grateful that Megha Sharma is making time for us. Megha does great work with APEGA and the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion portfolio, where she serves as the coordinator, including leading the Women and Gender Equality Grant Project. It's a research study on the impact of COVID-19 on women in engineering and geoscience. To our edifiers, welcome to the show and a good morning to you. Pilar, you always, I would imagine, get a real kick out of being featured on the cover of a magazine, let alone a magazine that is celebrating innovators and achievers like this. Where's your head at with the honor?
Oh my gosh, I am incredibly honored to be in the company of both Simba and Megha and being part of this conversation, Ryan. Yeah, I'm surprised. I was very surprised and most honored.
Did you, when you were growing up, I always like to pick people's brains on how they got to where they're at.
Yeah.
Did you have a background in library services? Did you have a background in executive leadership? How did you wind up as CEO of the EPL?
Well, yeah, really good question. And no, I didn't even know librarianship was a career. I grew up in a household with two parents who were in the service industry. Mom was a teacher and dad was a doctor, and both of whom were very involved in community, volunteered. Dad was the chair of the school board. So that kind of culture and those values were very much instilled in me as a kid. And so I always knew I wanted to do something to help folks, to make a difference in the community and give back. And I just happened upon an amazing librarian when I was doing my undergrad and doing an honors project who I really connected with, who was incredibly helpful. And I thought, wow, this and that sort of quest for knowledge, solving a mystery, making a difference, that really appealed to me in terms of a career.
I have such fond memories, and like we're talking literally 35, 40 years ago of being with my parents and walking out of the library with as many books as we could carry. And I remember even as a kid, when you have a plastic card to put in your new wallet, your Velcro wallet, that's a huge deal. Getting a library card was so cool. I'm looking forward to circling back with you in a second and talking about the evolving mandate of libraries and how they're changing and acting as these community hubs, continuing the tradition that's been there for so many years. Simba, my understanding is that you became involved in your field of work, your research, maybe based on a personal or family experience, the story of your grandmother. Would you be able to tell us about that?
Yeah, so originally, me and my family, we are from Zimbabwe and we migrated to Canada in 2005. And so when we came here, we got to do a little bit of schooling, working, and then we decided to go back to visit family back home. And so when I arrived back at Zimbabwe, one of the things I was looking forward to is meeting one of my grandmas. And she always used to ask you, how are you, by saying, are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy? And even if you're not happy, you had to say yes, because the question would be like, why aren't you happy? But when I did visit her, of course, she didn't recognize me. Just trying to remember who I am, who my parents were. And it was only on the last day that when we were leaving, when she's like, oh, you are the son of my son who's in America. Like, close enough. Yes, that's me. And, it was just kind of that sense of the person is still there, but a part of them is not there. And so when we came back, the idea was, could we do something to, on one end, prevent or mitigate the extent of conditions like dementia, and then on the other hand, being able to provide tools that better support individuals with dementia and other mental health disorders, of course.
So the longer that you studied, you earned a couple of different degrees, right? A Bachelor of Science in both psychology and neuroscience to sort of pave the foundation for what you were going to do. When did you start understanding how tech innovation could fit into this in a way that would help people, not just help healthcare providers diagnose some of these conditions, but also assist in life following a diagnosis?
So after my undergrad, my neuroscience one, I ended up publishing a research article on driving performance and behavior, which was super exciting. Except I realized that once you publish the paper, its translation into the real world for that paper specifically was non-existent. And so in kind of realizing that we're doing a lot of great research, not only in Edmonton, but across Canada, and then the way technology was progressing, if we're able to merge the two together, then a lot of the great research that's being done could actually be translated to actually help the people that it's meant to help. And so at Learnica, what we try to do is create a platform that allows people to merge that research so it can actually get to the people that it needs to help. And so we do that again by putting it in the hands of clinicians and researchers.
It's so fascinating. I'm so grateful that you're on the roundtable, Sima. We talked in two different conversations this week. On Tuesday, we talked about how wearable devices people have realized over time that actually the data that's coming from them is not actually that accurate. And then we talked yesterday with Jay Ingram, who's just a wonderful storyteller when it comes to science, about dementia and about Alzheimer's, and how we're deepening our understanding, though we don't know how to cure it. Maybe our understanding of what can lead up to it or some of the factors that can contribute to it. What's been your awareness like? The more experience you've gleaned here, and as you've become obviously a leader in the field, about how much we know or don't know about the human brain?
So it's accurate to say, like, the wearable devices, the data is not as accurate yet. But what we are doing is creating an infrastructure that when that data is going to be accurate, the system is going to be there. And our system, what it actually utilizes is not just the wearable data, but it's a hardware agnostic platform that allows people to integrate any data system. Even the clinical grade data systems can be integrated into our platform. The reason why we use some of the consumer devices is because they're easily accessible. And as a therapist, for example, if you want to be able to monitor between session sleep patterns or between session stress levels, that information can be invaluable to tell you how the treatment you are administering is actually helping the patient.
Mega, welcome to the show. Did you, as a young person, like, were you always keen on a career in STEM? Like, did you want to be an engineer when you were like 7 years old, or how did your journey start?
No, not at all. I actually wasn't a great student. So my engineering journey is kind of interesting because I think everyone imagines, like the nerds in kind of high school that go into engineering, but I was definitely not that. I was very confused and not trying my best throughout school. But I knew that my brain was just very math and science oriented. So that was just a field that I knew that I would eventually go in. And I wasn't super fond of biology. So I was like, okay, it looks like, something in physics and chemistry. And I had my physics course in grade 11, and it was just completely changed my perception of where I wanted to go. And my physics teacher was just incredible. And she was like, I think you'd be a really good engineer. You ask really good questions. And I didn't even really know what engineering was or what they did. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds great. And then I looked at the requirements and I was like, yep, I'm not going to be able to get in. Definitely did not have the grades. And, but I was like, you know what? Like, I think this is for me. And so I actually ended up going to Center High and upgrading my marks. And it was kind of a process for me to get into it. But once I got into my undergrad, I excelled a lot in my courses, and I was a really good student. I got really involved on campus and in my community and a lot of diversity work, and I really just found my passion. So yeah, I always tell students and kids, and like, when parents are really stressed out about their kids, they're like, oh, they're not studying enough, they're not doing enough. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like, it just, like, once you know what you want to do, like, there's so many options for you to like go and get into it. And yeah.
Meg, I'm going to come back to you in like 10 seconds, but Pilar is smiling so big, her face is going to break. What's making you smile so big about what she's saying?
I think just what Mega was talking about, you don't really know where you're going to land, and it's just making that connection with somebody who inspires you can make such a difference in terms of where you end up with your career. So that's why I'm smiling. It very much resonates. Mega thanks.
Pilar, you mentioned, you mentioned the influence of your parents, but was there somebody else in your journey that like I can think of names, I can recall names right now, people that had formative influences on me. Did you have one, Pilar?
Many folks. I remember Ms. McKay, who was my English teacher throughout high school, and I think instilled in me, and I think through my family too, very much a love of learning. And that's still, I really am a curious person. I love to read about things and understand things. So absolutely many individuals along the way, like Mr. Mercer, that librarian I talked with. And then when I was deciding whether or not to do my master's in library science, I just happened to select somebody from a university librarian at the University of Lethbridge. And she was, is and was amazing, very, very much a leader in the community, very dynamic and vivacious. So it just, I think just happenstance. I was lucky to meet the folks I did that led me to the path that I'm on.
It's so great. This is a total diversion. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. John Krasinski, like the star actor, was talking about, I didn't know this about him. It turns out he was a script intern for Conan O'Brien way back in the day, and he was talking about his first appearance years later he was now on The Office, and he was talking about his first appearance on a late night show was indeed with Conan O'Brien. And the biggest thing for him, he said, he just about choked up as he was getting set to walk out. The curtain puller, like that's the person's job. They pull the curtain so the guests can walk out. And I guess the curtain puller looked at him and said, "Johnny, we are just so proud of you. We're all," because he was the intern running around those hallways. And I just love those stories of the people that have had influence in people's lives coming up. So Mega, you get involved. I'm so grateful that you shared with us that like your marks weren't that great in high school. My marks were terrible in high school, to be honest with you, but I'm not an engineer, so consider that. But because I think a lot of times young or they'll hear about people that are big achievers and maybe they feel like their current circumstance, maybe that they've missed the boat, and that it's too late. And I love that, you're an example that when you find something that you actually have a passion for, that you're actually interested in, and you apply yourself to it, sky's the limit.
No, yeah, definitely. And yeah, so I think there's a lot of pressure on people to especially nowadays, to figure out what they want to do. They're like, if you want to get into med school, you have to start volunteering from grade 9. It's just, to me, it's just really silly. And there's so many ways. There's people in med school at age 40. So, I mean, I think we really do narrow down and weed out a lot of people that have potential when we put these pressures on, especially young students. Maybe with this pressure is just preventing people from actually going into fields that they would be really successful in. So yeah, just keep encouraging the people around you. It sometimes takes a little bit longer. And like I said, once you get into what you want to do, you tend to excel a lot, and even more so than people that might have had an easier way getting in, because I know in engineering, it was hard for me to get in. And so I was used to studying. I was used to really having a good time management schedule. And I really wanted this. So I was really passionate about it. Whereas there were a lot of students in my classes that had gone in, right away, and they maybe had really supportive parents. My parents were working crazy jobs, so I didn't have a lot of people doing my homework with me. And so maybe they had a lot of support to get all their homework done. I had really great marks. But when they got into engineering, they realized, what? Engineering coursework is really hard. So if you don't know how to do it, and if you don't have that base learning of really trying and, being able to get 40% and being like, what, that's okay. I'm going to keep going and not just giving up because it's the first time you've gone less than 80, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these things.
Nobody, you got to make your mistakes in post-secondary so you don't earn a 40% score on the first bridge you design, right? We want everyone to make their mistakes in the heart surgeons and the bridge builders. I'd prefer they make their mistakes in university. Now, and obviously we're going to make our way around the panel, but I want to get to a point here, Mega. Your feature, people can read these features in the latest issue of Edify, of course, in print. They do a beautiful job in print or online at edifyedmonton.com. You can read all of these features right now, Mega. So you have these hurdles. One of them maybe being your marks as you graduate out of grade 12, but then you crack the faculty and you get in, and then you realize that there's not a lot of women in STEM, right? And your involvement here, starting with Wisest, maybe you can tell us what Wisest is really, I think, one of the reasons probably why you're featured in these pages of this issue.
Yeah. So, I kind of realized that my story was a little bit unique when I got into engineering. Like I said, I, wasn't the biggest nerd necessarily. And I like hair and makeup and fashion and stuff. So I felt a little bit different, especially in like the hyper masculine environment of engineering in my undergrad. So I was looking for ways to get involved in student groups that really resonated with me. And at the time in engineering, there wasn't necessarily a student group like based on belonging. It was a lot of like, building a car and building a satellite, which are all just super cool as well. But I was kind of looking for more of like that belongingness and like, especially feeling kind of like I stuck out a lot and I didn't really know how to be masculine or try to fit in. So I was looking for groups that were promoting women in STEM. And so I came across Wisest, which is just an incredible organization. So they stand for Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And I got involved with them. But I realized some of the issues in engineering are really engineering prone, if that makes sense. So Wisest is a really great organization, works all across STEM. But like I said, there weren't a lot of people from engineering in Wisest either. So I was like, it'd be really cool to find my place in engineering to do this kind of work. So one of my friends came up to me and she was like, we like rant a lot about these like women issues and stuff. If I started a club, would you be interested in joining? Because I think we should really just do something about it. If we really want a place for ourselves, why don't we just create it? Because I'm sure there's more people that feel this way.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's great. You know what? Yeah, I would love to join that. And then so she created the club and I became the vice president of research because I'm very research oriented. So that was an entire situation, but it was really interesting starting a grassroots organization, and the Faculty of Engineering was just blown away by us wanting to do this, and they gave us so much support and so much guidance, and it's a very successful club. It's called Diversity in Engineering, and they still exist. And since we have graduated, and they have since then, had exec teams, had elections, just growing. Recently, they had, so in engineering, you have Gear Week at the first week of engineering. It's just a week for all the different areas to like welcome the new people to the faculty. So there's a whole bunch of like challenges around campus. And for the first time this year, they had a drag show at Gear Week. And I was just like, diversity in engineering, like I just was blown away. I could have never, ever thought the Faculty of Engineering on Gear Week would have a drag show. Yeah. And there were mechanical engineers and petroleum engineers dressed up, cross-gendered and dancing up there. And I was like, this is a totally different atmosphere of engineering that I joined in. And I'm so happy that this exists now, but just incredible.
For people listening on the podcast, they should know that you have been smiling the entire time you've been talking, and our other panelists are smiling listening to you, which is great. The enthusiasm, the optimism. It's why we read Ron's email before we introduced the three of you, because I was like, if you feel like you're looking for ways to turn down the anger button in your life, listen to these three edifiers, which is great. Simba, what sort of barriers? I mean, I'm sure there's tons when you're talking about tech and medicine and healthcare and pushing the envelope, and that, let alone the entrepreneurial side. I mean, I would imagine there's challenges all over the place as you forge into the great unknown of brain science and brain health. I mean, let alone what you're doing, and I want to pick your brain around how you're working with athletes with peak cognition. But what's a big barrier that you overcame or that stood in your way at some point in your professional journey?
How long do you have?
Yeah, sure, we got time.
I think there's a few barriers, both like internal and within like Lenica when you're trying to start something new, right? So I know one of the things as a company that we face very often is that research, for example, is a very slow moving area. Right? You need to get your ethics, you need to do the research properly, you need to get the publications and all those other components. While technology is very fast moving. And so sometimes when you try to marry those two together, it's like one is trying to kind of figure out, are we innovative? Do you have to be research-based? And then you're always trying to kind of have this tension between the two. The other thing, of course, is funding. We have been fortunate that in Edmonton, in Alberta, there's a lot of great funding opportunities for entrepreneurs, but a lot of the funding that's required to get a digital health product to market it has been a barrier, but we have had a lot of support there. And then, of course, the internal barriers. My educational background is just undergrad degrees. And so sometimes when people are like, oh, you're in the healthcare space, do you have a PhD? Are you a doctor? Are you a researcher? There's always that, do we actually know what we're doing? Fortunately, I'm surrounded by an amazing team of people that are way smarter than me, that kind of help us kind of navigate what we need to do in terms of like creating the product, and then also ensuring that it works within the system and for the people that we're designing it for. And I think finally, I'll add that one of the things that we have realized is no matter how well your technology works, it has to work within the context of the people that will be using it. And so one of the things that we are really working on right now is we know that our system works and it works really well. How can we make sure that it works for the healthcare professionals? Because they are busy, they are also overwhelmed, but they also want to help their patients. So trying to manage all those constraints and make sure that we still stay zen as we do that is quite a few of the barriers that we have faced, just to mention a few.
I'll circle back and ask you about the work you're doing with athletes, because it strikes me as a completely different avenue and absolutely incredible. And I expect to see gold medal podiums, sort of on your website. We've worked with them and them and them as the years go on. How exciting is that? But Pilar, it's not lost on me that as Simba's talking about, for example, Mega will say, okay, you got to have your PEng if you want to work on projects, and society demands it, and professional associations like APEGA demand it, and it makes sense. We understand why you have to have a professional designation to build a skyscraper. But you must be surrounded, like when you actually walk the library, when you actually go mingle with the people that are using it, you must be surrounded with people that are educating themselves. And as we see society's attitudes change, more, students are more keen on things like trade schools and polytechnic schools, and there seems to be less of a demand. People feel like you had to go to university back in the day, even if it was a sort of a square peg in a round hole type thing. You must see inspiration every single day of people educating themselves and going unconventional routes to get to where they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some amazing stories of how folks have found their success through coming to the library and reading and connecting and learning. And I think we are sort of that non-formal learning hub of our city where everybody from all walks of life are welcome, and they can take the traditional route, which is reading a book. They can learn about our amazing technology in our makerspace or the Fab Lab. They can come and interact with our simulation wall. And there was just a feature in the journal about the space exhibit, which if you haven't seen it yet, it is fabulous that we worked with the U of A and some Indigenous knowledge keepers to highlight the fantastic content that there's so much skill in our city that we're highlighting. Or you want to come and learn how to cook and understand nutrition and food literacy. We have settlement practitioners that help newcomers at most locations in our city. So we really are that sort of hub, that hub where people can learn at their own pace, how they want to learn and take their own journey that meets their needs the best.
Pilar, we've had people in our live chat that are like recounting their childhood memories. Like Tony, for example, said her dad used to drive her to the library every 2 weeks so she could load up on books. And we have these fond memories. For people that haven't stepped foot inside a brick and mortar library, and maybe I shouldn't even limit my question to that context, because you could probably blow that out the door, right? But
I could.
for someone that hasn't, let's say, visited or utilized a library for like 20 years, 25 years, what would blow their mind about how it's most different? I mean, what's the mandate now?
Well, I think it's not going to be sort of the shush place that you might have experienced as a kid or in your university or school years. I think it's very dynamic, very welcoming. Staff are out on the floor, roving, interacting with folks to see, how can we help you? We've got a gamer space and gamer spaces at multiple locations across the city. There's e-resources. You can take a course through LinkedIn Learning. You can learn how to cook, as I mentioned, in our amazing kitchen. You can learn how to make something that a dryer part with a 3D printer in our makerspace. We had somebody, a teacher's assistant, print Cree syllabics to be able to help her students learn Cree. Speaking of Cree, you can come and visit our Piasuaskaiken, which is our ceremonial space in Milner that is nurtured and held close by our elder in residence, and take Cree language classes, learn about Cree culture or Indigenous culture and identity. You can browse the art that's in our spaces. There are so many things I think that would really surprise and delight people. And you talked about barriers, and I think one of the biggest barriers is sort of that lack of awareness. And folks they go right to the stereotype and think that we are the same place that they might have experienced 20 years ago, and we are not.
Yeah.
And I think we demonstrated that through our Library of the Year award, which I must say we are still the only Canadian library. This is a North American-wide award which has won this award, and that really kind of highlights and recognizes that innovation and that dedication to customer service. And one other thing I'll mention, our community-led really is about taking our services outside our walls and breaking down barriers to those who need to understand those barriers and break them down to provide those library services. So we have folks who are out in the community delivering programs, early literacy programs, digital literacy programs, out in their organizations. We have literacy vans for them who go out to the underserved areas of our community and provide robotic fun games so kids can learn about coding. So I think, as you mentioned, people who haven't stepped into a library for the past decade would be, I encourage them to do so. You'll be surprised and delighted.
Yeah. And hey, listen, I say this at least once a week. I apologize to a guest. Today it's going to be you, Pilar, because I'm so eager to talk to people that I blow through their CV and I don't mention all the things. But it's great that you mentioned Library of the Year. I should also mention that under your leadership, Edmonton, our home city, was the first Canadian city named, and as I understand, I think it's still the only Canadian city on UNESCO's network of top learning cities in the world. That's the United Nations. People may have heard of it. And congratulations, by the way, my friend, as well, to see you as a recipient of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal for your contributions. That's a major accomplishment, and I hope you're very proud of that.
I am.
I asked the question of our fellow panelists, Pilar. Let me ask you, what's in your personal life, professional journey? You know what I'm saying? On your journey, what's a big hurdle that you encountered and overcame, and how'd you do it?
Really good question. So I think professionally, what can be hurdles or things that are out of your control that sort of distract you from doing the good work that is part of your mandate. And that could be a tweet that explodes about how a building looks, or
I wasn't going to go there.
Or it could be some of the things that we're dealing with societally that land in the library in terms of houselessness and addictions and mental health things. So I think those things are, we do our best. And I think those are things that can be hurdles and challenges, and that awareness. Personally, I would have to say for me, it's been that sort of confidence and belief that I can do it. And I still, have that little voice sometimes that says, are you really the CEO of the public library? I don't know if you should be there. I don't think you're qualified. So that kind of self-doubt that that has been a barrier that I have certainly had to work through throughout my career. So,
well, see, that's the beauty of winning a platinum Jubilee medal is you just wear it. You just like,
I can wear it.
You heard, Patrick Waugh, the great NHL goaltender, when Jeremy Roenick famously criticized him, he said, "I'm sorry, I can't hear what Jeremy's saying. I have my 2 Stanley Cup rings wedged in my ears." And so Pilar, you could, are you qualified to be CEO? I don't know. Let me ask my platinum Jubilee medal. That would always be
good advice, Ryan. Good advice.
Hey, let me ask you. Let me go somewhere because you just brought it up, and I appreciate you did because we like uncomfortable conversations on the show. There has been some talk, and I've seen scuttlebutt around the city. People will talk about how, and I'm paraphrasing, but the main floor of the library downtown looks like a homeless shelter. Or I was downtown in the library, and all these people are hanging out, loitering out front, and I don't feel safe at the library. Yet at the same time, I see a lot of people pointing out that the library is for everybody, and the point of a library is a gathering. So how do you reconcile? Like, that's not an easy challenge to confront, is it?
No, and we are not the only library. This is a phenomenon that's being experienced across North America. And today, in fact, I'm chairing the first meeting of a committee of the Canadian Urban Libraries Council on safety and security. There's a summit that's being held in the United States by Library Journal on safety and security. So I think it's just exacerbated with COVID. It's probably been an issue for the past decade, 20 years. And I think it's a societal, this is not a library issue. This is a societal issue and challenge. And I think we need really creative solutions. If there was a magic bullet, we would have found the solution. And these are complex issues that we all need to engage and determine creative ways to help folks and better serve them. And the library that's not our role. We want to be doing early literacy programming. We want to be helping folks find a job, learn about different careers, or find a book that they haven't read, or help kids learn how to read. Those are the things that we want to do, and that includes folks from all walks of life. So, but it's a balance, and I think perhaps there's been with our current climate, we are experiencing things that hopefully will be resolved in the coming months, years ahead. Yeah.
I love your optimism, and I think you're bang on.
You have to be optimistic and positive. Yeah.
Optimistic and realistic. I think that
totally.
life is about finding balances between those perspectives, right? So Simba, so Lenica is doing a lot of work with regards to brain health in the context of Alzheimer's, dementia, et cetera. Is it a completely different application? Can we talk about peak cognition and how your team, led by you at Lenica, is working with athletes? This appears to be fascinating. Can you take us into it?
Absolutely. So the initial component of our program was actually a virtual reality-based training program that aimed at training athletes' cognitive skills. So their attention, their visual processing speed, complex movement perception, all with the goal of improving their in-game performance. One of the things that is known now, especially at the competitive and high-profile sports level, is that what separates great athletes from good athletes is not their physical skill, but what's going mentally. And so our system aimed at really honing and training those mental skills to help athletes unlock that last 10% of their performance so that they can truly be great. And so that was our initial program, in which is being used by some varsity sports teams, some Olympic level athletes, as well as some NHL athletes are also utilizing the platform to help them improve their mental performance so that they can become better athletes. This system itself is very similar to peak cognition because there's an aspect of it that involves mental training, but then there's also an aspect of it that allows them to integrate the biometric information. Because as an athlete, we know that if they want to perform mentally, they still need to be sleeping well.
Right.
They still need to be managing their stress well. And so it's the same system, but being utilized for different components. So a lot of our sports users, they use it to improve their performance, but in the event like they get a concussion, they can use their pre-concussion performance to compare it to their post-concussion performance, because our system allows them to quantify the way they're performing cognitively. And if a person, let's say, ends up suffering from a stroke or gets dementia, we are eventually going to have enough data to be able to normalize what performance data that we are expected or you perform on a day-to-day basis. And if you suffer from a cognitive impairment, we can use that as a benchmark as well.
Wow.
So it's the same system, different markets.
So it's completely different than sports psychology, right? Like it's not training an athlete to not get down in the dumps if they're on a losing skid or they haven't scored a goal in 10 games. It's different than that. It's actually training the brain to fire more quickly or to perform better in the heat of battle.
Yes, so you can visualize it in terms of like if you go into the VR program where you are now immersed in a virtual environment, the game allows you to track multiple objects simultaneously as they move. And so if you think of a goalie, they have to track the players, they have to track the opponents, they have to track the puck all simultaneously and be able to respond to what's happening in the gameplay. Our system presents this information in a more dynamic way and faster than what they'll naturally see when they're in the game. And so if they're able to process information that's moving at, let's say, 100 kilometers an hour, for lack of a better word, and they only experience 20 kilometers during the game, then their brain is able to process that information a lot easier, especially at critical phases of gameplay.
This is absolutely amazing stuff. And I know that me and I'm sure audience members are going to be keeping a keen eye on this as it further develops and becomes more predominant in sport. Like everybody's looking to get the edge up. And I think there's a huge market for this kind of stuff. You're like, yeah, tell me something I don't know. So we'll be watching with great interest. I want to let all three of you know as we prepare to wrap our conversation, we're so grateful that you've made time for us. I want to give you like 60 seconds advance notice, Mega, before I have a question for you. I want to ask you for one piece of advice, just so you have a second to think about it. One piece of advice that somebody gave you that has stuck with you, that has driven you, that has motivated you, one piece of advice. Before we get there, Mega, I want to bring this full circle. Your work that you're doing with Apega, and I should note that I've done work with Apega. I've worked with them for almost 10 years hosting their events and I host their golf tournament, I've hosted their awards shows, and I just know that membership to be just a wonderful group that desires to achieve excellence. And I know a big part of that is seeing equitable representation in its membership. And I understand that you've actually been playing a leading role in this 30 by 30 initiative, where they want to see at least 30% of their membership be women by the year 2030. And that would represent, as if I need to tell you, doubling the number of women in Apega's membership in the next 7 years. So what does the road to get there look like?
Yeah. So I'm fairly new to the group, but this work has been, Apega is really passionate about having more women in the industry, and they always have been. But in the recent years, we've gotten a lot of funding from the federal government to really make sustainable change and do a lot of research. As engineers, we're very research oriented. So before we, spend a lot of money on policy guidelines, we need to research what the barriers are and how to actually be effective in our strategies. So yeah, our numbers aren't looking super great right now, but I think that there is a lot of optimism in the future, because I think when we look at our membership, a lot of the membership before 2017 was a lot of older guys that went into engineering. So they're still holding these positions in the industry and they make up a lot of the membership. But as the years go on and the older generation continues to retire, we're going to see this number go up quite a bit. And that's the expectation that we have, is because there are more women going into the faculty of engineering and graduating from engineering. It's just that those numbers aren't seen in the overall picture because there's still so many older men holding positions to say. So I think once we see the retirement age approach in the next few years, we're going to see a huge change, but it's also preparing industry for that change. So making sure that we have good resources for these women, that we're actually not just getting them into the field, but we're retaining them, because that's another issue, is how to retain them long term, and having policies, mat leave and flexible work hours, and etc., for men and women, so they don't have to feel like they have to pick between family versus work and etc. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of work to still be done, but we're very optimistic.
Yeah, and good people, contributing to it, which is really encouraging. Megan, while you're holding the mic, can you think of one piece of advice that somebody gave you at some point in your life that really resonated?
Yeah, if you want to make real change, you have to get everyone on board. If I'm really passionate about women's rights, if it's just the women's that are, taking up all the burden to make the change, it's a lot of work. And not really fair. So it's really important for every single person to get on board, to make real impact and to make real change, and hold yourself accountable. So especially in engineering, because it's so male dominated, like we need the male membership to take this work seriously as well.
Love it. Simba, what advice really resonated with you at one point in your life?
Oh, I was hoping for the 1 minute thinking warning. I think the advice that resonated with me was, whatever you want to do, if it's important to you, once you figure it out, be willing to work really hard for it, and realize that there are going to be setbacks, and your ability to be able to deal with those setbacks gracefully will help you end up getting there. And so one of the things that I know, like even like where they are starting something new, anyone who's tried to innovate, whether it's a new company within the industry, realize that there's a lot of opportunities to learn, which people sometimes call failures. And just being able to bounce back consistently is very important to ensure that the vision that you have for a better world actually materializes.
I love that. Opportunities to learn, which some people call failures. I just wrote that down. I'm going to stick that. That'll be something I take with me, Simba. So thank you very much. Pilar, last word to you.
Oh, it's hard going last.
I know.
Both, Simba and Mega had words that I was thinking myself. I'm going to maybe take a different track. And it was a speaker who was a negotiator for the Iran-Contra affair. And what he said, he was from New York, and in his New York accent, he said, "You gotta care, but not that much." And the idea that you can't be so immersed and so passionate that you're not able to see the distance from something, or the objectivity. So that kind of sticks with me.
I love it. That's Pilar Martinez, CEO of Edmonton Public Library. We've also been lucky enough to be hanging out with Mega Sharma, the EDI coordinator at APEGA, and the CEO of Lenica Research Group, Simba Nyazika. All three of them Edifier Award recipients, as featured and celebrated in the winter issue of Edify. You can find it online at edifyedmonton.com, or of course, you can find the print copy, the beautiful print copy, around town, wherever you pick up your magazines. Thanks to the three of you. Have a wonderful weekend.